The parasha of this morning is called Behalotecha, and I also subtitled it a little bit of the taste of responsibility. The parasha of this morning is Behalotecha, and I subtitled it the taste of responsibility. Because responsibility has a taste. We have to know the taste of our responsibility before the Holy One, blessed be He. Parasha Behalotecha details many subjects that occur both before and after the children of Israel leave from Mount Sinai. The parasha is divided into three parts. We have the beginning, the middle, and the end. Number one, the ascent before leaving Mount Sinai. The parasha begins with the method of the lighting of the golden menorah by Aaron, the high priest, the purification and the inauguration of the Levites in their service in the sanctuary, the first Pesach in the wilderness, the law of the Pesach, Shenim, the decision for when to travel, and the order of the travel of the camp of Israel, and the making of the two silver trumpets of Moshe. The first journey of the Israelites is detailed as is the taking leave of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, from the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. The middle is also known as the inverted norns. So there is a short section of 85 texts or 85 letters in the parasha known as the section of the inverted norns, which need much explanation. This section acts as a divide between the ascent and descent of the fortune of the children of Israel in the wilderness. And the last one is the descent after leaving Mount Sinai. The beginning of the trouble in the wilderness. The Torah tells of the complaints of the children of Israel to Moshe to provide them with meat, the prophecy of Eldad and Meldad in the camp, and the insulting of Moses' wife Zipporah by his sister Miriam and Aaron, and their consequence, punishment. So, what I want us to understand that the word, and also the word Behalotecha means to rise, or in the course of rising up. Its immediate association is to Aaron, the high priest, ascending the steps of the golden menorah and coming to kindle, that is, to rise its flame in the sanctuary, as detailed in the half of the parasha. I want also get something very, very clear here. We have the ascent, the middle, which is called the inverted norm, and the descent of the children of Israel is all taught in this parasha. I want to give us a particular example that can help us to understand this parasha perfectly well. And that example is the example of an elevator. For an elevator to go up, let's say you come inside an elevator and you press level 5 or 5th floor, that you are going to the 5th floor, and somebody press the bottom, before to go down. And since you press the first floor and you enter, but before it takes you to the 5th floor, it has to go to the basement, to pick up other people before it goes upstairs. So this example is set up for you to reach your goals in life. Sometimes it seems as if you go 10 times backward before you move upward. And the problem then is that most people, when they go backward, they get what? They get discouraged and they get stuck in that backwardness and they die. Israel did not get stuck in that. It's very, very important for us to understand this principle. He said it is also written in the Tanakh, a man falls 7 times and 7 times a man rise up. Some people that get stuck in the past, some people that fall and they go back, and instead of them rising up to stand and be what and be vigilant and be persistent in their work, they do what? They get discouraged and they get lost in their backwardness. But God is telling us we shouldn't act like that. You shouldn't be that way. Even though when it seems as if you go backward, actually you are not going backward. God is trying to clarify things for you to understand, and you have to be enlightened to have the understanding and the knowledge that God is actually trying to see who you are as a person, or as a synagogue, or as a community. So God is telling us not to be discouraged, but because actually He's going to lift us up. Parashat Beha'aloteka deals with many very diverse issues. A major portion is devoted to our travel in the wilderness. This travel was dictated by the movement of the Aneni Hakavod, the cloud of glory hovering above the Mishkan. The Ramban writes how the movement of the cloud presented many tests for Bnei Israel. At times, they come to a place which in their eyes was an unfavorable place to stay, and yet, if the cloud wouldn't move, neither would they. Other time, they would stop in a place for the night, and the cloud will move again the next morning. This was obviously exhausting for them. At times, they will remain in one place for a full day, and then the cloud will continue to move. This was even more frustrating because they were thinking they are going to stay after unloading, and they have unloading their wagon. They will begin to do what? To unpack again. What am I trying to say here? That it was said by Ramban that it is very for human. I mean, for the children of Israel, it was very frustrating, the journey, because sometimes they got to a place that they think it is favorable, but the cloud will not stay. The cloud will continue to move. They have to move. Sometimes they get into a place that they think it is unfavorable, it is bad, and the cloud will stay. So they have to stay. They have no choice now that to do what? That to continue to do exactly what the cloud is telling them to do. Now, why couldn't Adonai and Moshe offer Bnei Israel the bare minimum that would expect from any competent travel agent? A clear travel itinerary. Let us know where we will be staying. That way, we could check out in advance which restaurants serve the best manner. Let us know for how long, that is, we could know if we should unpack or just dig out our toothbrushes. Why was there a need for this confusion and the subsequent frustration and hardship? I'm trying to just give us like a kind of a joke that on the light. I'm trying to give a sign. Understand? So that that the Holy One, blessed be He, could Moshe could not do what? Give the children of Israel a perfect travel itinerary. I mean, because the people are actually, for sure, as I just explained, they were completely frustrated because of continue, see this and this, and, and not having a clear understanding of what, for them, not having a clear understanding of what is actually going on. Only God, only the Holy One, blessed be, and Moshe understood what was actually going on. It seems that some people cannot appreciate something special. Imagine Bnei Israel were treated to a heavenly gift of manna, a supernatural delicacy that fell from the heavens. Yet they complain about it. Not only did the manna sustain Bnei Israel during their 40 years journey in the desert, it has the ability to transform itself to please the palate of the most advanced culinary in the world, or any culinary critics. It tasted exactly the way its eater desired it to taste, whether Belgian waffle with ice cream, stick, or hash brown. Through mere thought, the eater was able to transform the manna flavor into the most delicious delicacy. Yet Bnei Israel was still not happy. We remember the free fish that we eat in Egypt, they said. Number 11:5. They exclaim, the Talmud is troubled by the word free fish. Since when, asked the Talmud, was anything free in the land of slavery? Bnei Israel has no mitzvot to observe during most of their exile in Egypt. They had not yet received their charge at Mount Sinai. Therefore, they recall the free fish that they ate during the Egyptian bondage. So, what am I trying to let us understand here? That the manna that was given to them, the food of the angels, that was given to the people to eat for these 40 years, to sustain them in the wilderness, these people did what? They complained about it. They keep on complaining, oh, you know what, this thing, I don't like it, it doesn't taste good, it doesn't have any taste, every time. Complain. Oh, we don't have meat, we want to eat meat. Why come you said you don't have meat? That was a total lie. Because they actually have meat. Because the Torah said, and they left Egypt with all their cow, with all their cattle, with all their goat, with all their ram, with everything, all their livestock. Are you saying now that you don't have meat to eat? Because they don't want to kill their own meat. You see? So it's just, people just want to complain for complain's sake. They don't want to complain because of the continuous movement. They want to settle down. They don't want to actually travel down to the land of promise. They just want to settle down and stay there like that. So therefore, they look for excuses to complain and complain and complain. But there is a saying, that said, when did a free fish come? Because they are saying, oh, we remember in Egypt our free fish that we eat. When can a slave eat something that is free? Because there is nothing free under the sun. You see, you have to work your way up. You have to work for everything that you have. Oh, we will remember what we eat in Egypt. We will remember the wonderful way of Egypt. We remember the beauty of Egypt. We remember the nice cold water of Nile that we drank, or this and that. Just to complain for no reason. So they are saying, yes, they remember the so-called free fish because there was no responsibility. With the manna, there is a responsibility. That's why I say the test of responsibility. That there are rules that guide these manners. There are rules that you have to obey in order for it to taste properly in your mouth. But these people, they don't want to obey this principle and these rules. They think that, in Egypt, your master, this is a slave. Your master tell you what to do and you have to do it. And God is leading them, they complain. The obvious question is, however, what does food, fish, or manna have to do with freedom? Why did they complain about their new responsibility and intrinsically link it with the miraculous bread? What is the miraculous bread that changed their status? Why did they link fish with freedom? What was it about the manna that made them feel they had a chip on their shoulders? Well, let us look at this in the Haftorah. A Haftorah of this week Haftorah was recording the prophecy of Zechariah to Yehoshua the Kohen Gadol in the year 3390. Zerubbabel along with Yehoshua lead 4,000 Bnei Israel back to Israel. They began building the second temple, only to be stopped when Cyrus withdrew his permission. In this prophecy, Zechariah showed Zerubbabel that he could be worthy of effecting forgiveness for Bnei Israel in spite of his own shortcoming. He was shown a vision of the menorah, the obvious connection to a parasha, representing the eventual purity of Bnei Israel and their acceptance by the other nations. The less obvious connection to our parasha may be the concept of Teshuvah and its relationship to the fulfillment of our mission. Just as the generation of the Exodus struggled with who they were in contrast with who they should have been, so too in the building of the second Hamikdash and the second Jewish Commonwealth, Zerubbabel and Yehoshua struggle with the reality of whom they were in contrast to their undertaking of resurrecting the soul of their people. Commentary explained that when Bnei Israel reminisce about free fish, they remember an era when they had no spiritual or moral responsibility. Bnei Israel understood that when one eat manna, the fear of the angels, angelic responsibility accompanying his gastronomic action, Bnei Israel would have rather forgone the delicacy of miraculous manna to be free of the responsibility it entails. So, what am I trying to explain here? What I'm trying to say is that Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, rather don't want to eat the manna because of the responsibility that it entails. To them, the responsibility is too much. To them, step 1, step 2, this and this. No. Why can't you just give us something and let us eat? We don't want on the Shabbat. You cannot go and pick. You can only pick the one that you are going to eat in a particular day, or before the Shabbat you can pick a double. If you pick too much, it's going to spoil before the morning. All these things to them, no. It doesn't make sense. The Torah also spoke that some of them that tested God, they saw the wrath of God. Some of them that went to go and pick a double before morning, it turned to 1. But during the Shabbat, it said perfectly well. So there are all this responsibility that the people are not willing to do. So they remember free fish. Often in life, we hesitate to begin the first step. Though that step may be simple and uncompleted, we fear to begin treading in full awareness of the responsibility that those first steps may lead us. We are always very scared. We are afraid to give the first step. And so, when I put the first step, my second step will give me more responsibility. And the third step will give me another responsibility. The first step will give me another responsibility. As I go up, the more I go up, the more responsibility I have. As a leader, I have my own responsibility. A leadership, as I explained several times, is not you sitting down and giving a command. It's you actually sacrificing yourself for your people. Rising the soul of the people, as we see in the life of Yehoshua, the Kohen Gadol, and Zerubbabel, that led the people back into Israel to start the construction of the second temple. It was a great responsibility. It wasn't easy. But these men were fully aware of their responsibility before their people. Leadership is not you crossing your leg and let the people be a slave unto you. Actually, your job is to serve your own people, to make sure that they are safe, to defend them by all means that God has given you. So therefore, we shouldn't be afraid of our first step. Neither must we be afraid of the second, the third, or the fourth step, because God Himself, in His mercy, is taking us higher and higher and higher. When you think in your mind that you are going back, it's God showing you what did you do wrong, what did you do right, and what can you improve more. Because actually you are not going back, but God is lifting you up. Accepting responsibility is, however, the role of the people to whom the world look for guidance. We as a people of God, we as the children of Israel, the whole world look up to us for spiritual guidance, and we have to be responsible. We have to take our responsibility very, very serious, because the only one, blessed be He, said that we are the light of the world. Without us in this world, this world will be a complete darkness, complete chaos and destruction. But as far as Israel still remain on the planet, the light, the menorah will continue to shine. The menorah will continue to be lit, because the Torah is alive. The first bite of a new undertaking will surely be delicious, challenging, though the second bite perhaps a little more difficult to swallow. The first bite of a new challenging or of a new course is challenging, because for the motor to turn, you have to do a lot of work. But remember, once the motor starts turning, the work, it's not that it remains less, but you have to continue to maintain it so that it will continue to run and run. You need to change the oil. You need to lubricate it. You need to put the coolant. You need to do a lot of things so that the motor will not do what? Will not overheat. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but it's not going to be as hard as the first step. So everything in life starts with the first step. But at the end of the meal, you will have had a biting more than what you can swallow. At the end of the meal, you cannot bite what you cannot swallow, right? So you can only bite the one that you can swallow, that you can eat, which is your responsibility. We have to take the responsibility very, very serious, as we read in the Messianic writing, that Shaul was sending a letter to the people in Corinth, telling them, let me just go ahead, let me read it so that we can understand it more. Telling them that, just a minute, chapter 10, 6 to 7. Okay, now, these things were an example for us, so that we should not covet after evil things as they coveted. Neither should we serve idol, as some of them serve, as it is written. The people sat down to eat and drink, and rose to play. Neither let us commit sexual sin, as some of them committed, and they fell in one day 20 and 3,000. Neither let us attempt the Messiah, as some of them tempted, and serpent destroyed them. Neither should you complain, as some of them complain, and they perish by the destroyer. All these things which befell them were for an example to us, and they are written for our instruction, on whom the end of the world has come. Wherefore, let him who think he stand beware, or else he may fall. No trial come upon you, but what pertains to men, and Elohim is faithful, who will not permit you to be tried beyond your ability. So, all these things that happens to our forefathers are written, for example, for their children. so that we will not fall in the same trap of what happened to our forefathers. That we should not just come out and complain for no reason. That we should not just come out because you think your journey is too tough, because you think that your life is complicated, because you think the responsibility is too hard and you don't want to take up the responsibility. You complain and complain and complain for no reason. God is telling us that indeed, that is why this is written for our own example, so that we will live an exemplary life, a life worthy of the children of Elohim, a life that is dictated by Him, not by us. Because if you think that, oh, you know what, I'm okay, I'm good, let me just stay the way I am. I don't want nobody to push me. I will not push nobody. Then what good are you then? If you cannot tell the people what they are doing wrong and what they are doing right. If you cannot stand on justice and what is true. If you cannot preach about the kingdom of God. So therefore, my people, this morning, the Torah is telling us that when you think that you are going back, don't be discouraged. For soon, God will lift you up. But you have to understand the principle. You have to examine yourself perfectly well. What I did wrong, what I did right. And let God, as David said, Lord, shine your light in that part of my life that I could not see, so that I will see and do what is right and what is just. So that I will lead sinner back unto you. So that I will preach the kingdom and the saving grace of your power. Those who have died, those who have died on the fear of leadership and responsibility will realize that the food of accomplishment is truly more delicious than chewing over a mystery. The responsibility is delicious. It's good because you yourself will take pleasure in it, because you are leading people back unto God. Instead of you sitting down in your backwardness, or instead of you sitting down in your misery, chewing your misery every time. Oh, you know what? These people did this, someone did me wrong, this one did me wrong. Every time complain. You never look unto yourself what you did wrong. Maybe you are the one that was wrong. For you to come back and take yourself and think within yourself what I did wrong. No, everybody is wrong. I am the only one that is right. So God is telling us responsibility is actually tasty. When we take our responsibility and stand on the truth and stand on the word of life, on the Torah, and we follow the way of the Torah, then, after then, will we see the upliftment in our life. Shabbat Shalom.